Welcome to KP Education Systems brief overview on how we use gamification, artificial intelligence to create rigor and high engagement for students who are learning utilizing a computer-based learning system. So first thing I will show you is this is a student account. This will show you a little bit about the student experience, and you see that John Graduate here is taking multiple classes. Your typical student will be in one or maybe two classes. So let's look at a relevant topic of today, ServSate, because proper hygiene is very important now. So here's our module. So we have our student guide, our first module, and our first test, and so on and so forth. So we have multiple modules and tests that the student can go through. So let's look at a module, Forms and Contaminants. So here is our learning objective, Forms and Contaminants, and here are our concepts, which can be considered pages in a book. So let's look at big six pathogens. Excuse me. So here we have a listen button. So all of our content is fully narrated by a human being. So if you click on it, the students who have a difficult time reading can have it read to them, or they can read along, which, as you know, creates a higher level of retention, because if you mix multiple pedagogies in the learning process, it'll enhance that situation. So there's media, there could be videos, there's pictures, charts, diagrams, whatever is necessary for the student to learn and understand big six pathogens. Now over here we also have a text-to-speech engine. So if you have plugins on your browser and you like a British accent to be read to you, I personally prefer Aussie. You could actually use the text-to-speech engine, and then you could actually utilize any plugin or extension to do it in any voice. In fact, you could even translate it into any language that's available based on typically Google Translate. So let's go to page 2. We're learning about Fat Tom. Then page 3, bacterial contaminants, so on and so forth. So after I've gone through and I've studied these 9 pages of content, I will then go down and do what we call a check your knowledge. So what this does is it engages our system and checks the student's knowledge. So what happens is when I click on this, I'll be taken to a quiz. Now this quiz will ask questions based on the content that I've just reviewed here. It also intelligently selects the questions based on how I previously answered the questions and other values such as item response theory, which I'll cover later. So after I've gone through and answered the questions, I'll get a result. So best way to think about this is the system is your personal tutor. So you say to me, I'm done studying forms and contaminants, now quiz me. So I ask you questions about each of these topics, and based on your answers, here are your results. I believe you're at an apprentice level. So that means you've done pretty well. You're averaging apprentice. But you're not green, which represents scholar. So we see that over here, I have identified that parasites is a topic that you've mastered. Good job. But down here, these other topics, I really feel like you need to spend more time and improve on them. In fact, you demonstrated a very lack of understanding of food allergens, so you should spend a lot of time on that topic and study it, please. So after we are done studying the materials, I could go back and take another check your knowledge, and this time it'll be different questions, because what we're trying to do is measure the student's depth of knowledge rather than if they could just look up answers and memorize the answers. So this challenges the student in that way, but also creates a stronger learner because they don't know what questions in Fat Tom are going to be coming at them, or food allergens and whatnot. The system is actually intelligent enough to know if the student's guessing, if they're just goofing off, and other things. So basically, students will try to game the system, but it's too intelligent to not allow that. Another thing is, if we go back to the results screen, we notice that we have parasites here, but here it's not listed in this concept list. That's because that concept has been remediated out. So if I want to see it again, I click on this remediation only button, and here it is. We do that because we want the students to focus on the topics that are giving them trouble so that they could focus on them rather than repeating content that they've already demonstrated mastery on. So as the student goes through this check your knowledge process, this list will get smaller and smaller and smaller, narrowing down the concepts that give them the most trouble. So that you as a teacher, if you need to review their account, you could take a look and say, hey, you're still having problems with food allergen. Let me give you some tips or some pointers and help them along individually because the system has identified that they don't understand it. So something about that content is not clicking with them. So you can go in and intervene at that point. Whereas the other topics, they're probably fine on. You also notice that we have awards here. Now these awards are basically pictures of our mascot Chromie traveling the world. So each module is assigned a random place on Earth. In this case, the module Forms and Contaminants is located in Hong Kong. So whenever I take a check your knowledge, they'll receive a picture with a little caption about it. Now the pictures will be determined based on how well they perform on the test. So if they perform not so well, they'll get a picture of, in this case, like in front of a restaurant looking at Peking duck. If they do better, then they'll see a monument or a picture of an attraction or something that's very recognizable. And we also put this in so that if they are curious enough, they could take a look and see where that picture originated from. So building a little bit of world geography into the experience. Fun stuff. So now the student has gone through, remediated the content, studied. Then after that, they can then take the test. So if I'm prepared, I should have gotten a really good score on this test. In this case, I received a 25% grade. That's because I didn't study and didn't do very well. But so next time, I could then come over here and study hygiene. And if I get everything green, the likelihood of scoring higher on the test is also the equivalent of that. Now, as a teacher, this is what you see. This is the grade screen for my class. So we see that we have multiple columns, tests, average, and these numbers. So the numbers in the squares represent test scores. So the student got 100%, 85%, and so on and so forth. And we also see the level of mastery the student has attained in each of these modules. So then you could take a look at this and say, okay, I need to go and help Bobby because Bobby is not doing very well. If you see any red, that means that you're doing terribly well. I mean, quite terrible. But also, you can infer other things about it to make your job a little easier. So if we look at column 2, keeping food safe, column 6, column 8, we see that most of the students have scored a green in these columns. So that means that I really don't need to spend a lot of time covering these materials because they've already demonstrated a great depth of knowledge and mastery of those content. So then I come over here to 16, food safety management, number 12, lesson on preparing and reheating foods. Then I could go, okay, most of my class is having problems with these topics, so maybe I should have a special lab, a special lecture, or something to further enhance this topic so that it gets into their brains a little bit more. So this will make you more efficient because you'll be able to pinpoint and focus your time on areas that have been identified as troubling for your class. Over here, we have our test score. So this is your average test score. But then here, average is actually something that is very important for you because if you want to use it as a predictor to pass the ServSate certification, then that is one way to do so. So what average does is it demonstrates in a graphical form the level of engagement the student has made in the system. So we can see that Chelsea here has scored a 96% average on the test, very good, and has a higher level of engagement as compared to Joyce or Bobby. So the likelihood of Chelsea passing the certification on their first try is extremely high. Whereas we come down here, Terry has high level of engagement, but hasn't seemed to have mastered all the topics yet to turn it green. So there's still a good chance that Terry will pass. But if we see a green, then we know that they will have a much higher chance to pass the certification. Whereas Joyce here tested really well. She did 87%, but her engagement with the content is very low. So that means that her retention is probably very low as well. So the likelihood of her passing the certification is low in our opinion. So teachers who read these two columns properly, have actually reported back to us that they have attained 100% pass rate on the first try for the ServSate certification, which, as you know, is not a very easy test to pass on the first try. So there we have it. So this is our grade screen, and this is how you read and interpret it. Now let's take a look at the item bank, which is one of the favorite parts of our system that teachers love. So this is our ServSate class, and I'm going to open up our saved tests. So here we have a variety of tests that have been already created. So let's look at the food safety test. So here is our food safety test, and we have here our item bank below. So we're looking at the section called Keeping Food Safe. Now I could collapse this, and we can see these other topics as well. So let's look at keeping food safe because that's part of the food safety test. Now we see that we have this question here, which has been checked, and it's in the Remember Bloom category of Bloom's taxonomy. So we have more questions here, and you can see that in the topic foodborne illness, we have lots of questions tied to that particular topic. So we pride ourselves in that because we have about 10 times more questions in our item bank than the average publisher. This is important for us because of the artificial intelligence, which I'll go over later. So we see that we have questions that are checked because these questions are in the test that I have determined important for that particular test. Now I could go here and change it, so I could check one and uncheck another, and go on, so on and so forth. Now, speaking to our artificial intelligence, this is very important because if we look at the information pitfalls and prevention, and let's say I'm a tutor and I'm only given 2 questions to ask a student about this topic, and those are the only 2 questions I'm ever allowed to ask. How well can I infer the student's level of understanding and depth of knowledge based on just 2 questions? Not a whole lot. So we have multiple questions that the system can choose from. And utilizing item response theory, or IRT, we actually can intelligently pick questions based on the historical value of the question on how students have answered it in our data sets. So in other words, I know this question is answered correctly most of the time, so has a lesser value. Whereas this question here has is harder because more students don't get it right the first time. So based on those values, I could have a better understanding of which questions to ask, when to ask them, and also what to determine. So for instance, if I ask this question and I see that 90% of students have answered this question correctly and this student got it wrong, I can easily infer that this student is cheating, or not cheating, guessing. Students will also try to cheat the system too because they'll try to look up answers that they were asked, but then the next time around they may be asked this one, but the next time they might be asked this one or this one. So they'll never know which question is going to come at them. It's never going to repeat over and over again. So that's how our artificial intelligence system works, is that it utilizes a lot of big data to determine the questions. Now, one of the things that we also have is a printer-friendly version. So let's say, for instance, a student can't take tests online for a variety of reasons. Then you could create a printable version. So this is our food safety test generator, and I can even change the number of distractors. If you have any special needs students who require a limitation on distractors, you could change that. And then here is the test. Voila. Here are the questions, and down here below is the answer key. Now, this is generated so that you could then copy and paste this to your favorite word processing program and then print it out and distribute it to your students. Now, I want to take note that this question here, why are people who take certain medications, as the first question. Now, this is important because if I leave and I come back and create another printer-friendly version, you'll see that that question is not number 1 anymore. So every time you generate a test, it randomizes the questions so that it's not the same every time. In fact, we also randomize the distractors. So A might be the answer now, but next time it might be B or D or C. So if you create multiple versions of a test, then the likelihood of a student knowing the answers based on a letter is extremely low because it could be changed. This is to curb the potential for cheating because we know students don't cheat, but we don't want to give them the chance to do so. So that is our item bank. Very popular because we have a lot of questions to choose from, and the intelligence makes it very difficult for the students to game the system. Now, the last thing I'm going to cover here is what we call project-based learning. So in our system, we have a lot of content. So for instance, like if I were to look at the section called like dessert and pastry, we have uh, information on cakes and videos to demonstrate their various techniques, like so on and so forth. So there we go. Let's look at this. Okay, so we have lots of videos, but let's look at a project now. So let's look at a project that is very popular with teachers. In the culinary history section, we have what we call the next Food Network producer. So in this project, we have a badge. So the students will earn the badge when they complete this project. So here we have our problem statement, any content that's necessary to complete this project, steps to solve the problem, and evidence. Now, evidence is very important because these are the things you check off to qualify the student to earn the badge. So here we have a file, a reflection question, and a grading rubric. Now, what's very important about our projects is that you can edit it. So in a lot of cases, you might not agree with the title. You want to change it to something else, you can. You can even upload your own photo of the badge. You could also change the problem statement. So you could modify it to whatever your needs are. And then you could also change the materials. So in some of our projects, it might require a piece of equipment or some ingredients that the student might not have available or you might not have available. So you could change that as well. And then we come down to steps. So here are our steps. Step 1, here's the instructions. Now if I wanted to change these steps, I could edit it and change to whatever I want, and so on and so forth. Now you notice that we have down here a gold call-out box. So what gold means is it's teacher only. So only you can see it on your account and the students cannot see it. So these are like teacher notes that you would find in like teacher editions of books. Now lastly, the evidence. Now this is important because let's say you don't want to use our file upload system, you want to use Google Drive or something else, you could eliminate it or change the instructions. Now over here we have a prompt, this reflection question. So if you want to change that question to something else, you can. You can even add additional questions if you want. And here is our grading rubric on presentation. So if you want to change this up or remove certain things, like let's say I want to remove visual aids because we don't require that, you can remove that rubric. And then when you grade the students, by clicking on the different squares, it'll give the student points according to the rubric. So this is our project-based learning. We have many, many projects in our system that you can choose to use and assign, and you can also modify and change it. So this is our brief overview of the KP education system. So giving you a chance to kind of see the magic behind our mastery system, and also how we help create engagement with our students by gamifying it and making it so that we can identify problem areas so that they can remediate the content that they are having problems with. Thank you very much, and if you need any additional help, please contact us, and we could also have advanced training where we can go into many of the other features that I am unable to demonstrate here today, but suffice it to say, there's a lot of cool things that we do in our system. Thank you very much, and have a good day.